I'd now like to call upon Israel's most articulate advocate in the United States and perhaps the entire world, a man who needs no introduction, Professor Alan Dershowitz.
Thank you so much. First of all, I am so thrilled that Ambassador Ron Persor is Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. He makes precisely the kind of defense at the United Nations and around the world that is needed. So please, you really deserve our tremendous appreciation. We all hope this is the first of many conferences, and therefore I want to have a little chutzpah and suggest a few rules for how these conferences should proceed in the future. The first rule, please, is do not ever boo a president of the United States, no matter who that president is, no matter whether you agree with the president or disagree with the president. Do not ever boo a president of the United States. Nobody speaking on behalf of Israel or who is perceived as speaking on behalf of Israel should ever engage in that kind of conduct. Number two, please, Israelis, do not bring your political domestic battles to the international forum. Do not play them out here in front of the world. You are the most articulate and feisty group of people in any democracy in the world. There is plenty of opportunity, plenty of occasion to play these out in the Knesset, on television in Israel. But when you come to international forums, please speak in a united fashion. Present Israel's case. Present what I call the 80% case, the consensus case, the case that we all agree on, the case that doesn't divide us, the case that unites us. And finally, recognize, as the former Prime Minister and others have said, that when it comes to existential decisions that must be made about Israel's security, only the people of Israel and their elected officials can make those decisions. They cannot be made by Americans sitting in Times Square or in Brooklyn or in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or in the Oval Office. They must be made by the people of Israel. The people of Israel can assess the risks, and that's what it means to be a democracy. And so I want to spend my few minutes talking about what the appropriate role of the diaspora is in addressing the most serious existential problem Israel has ever faced, namely a nuclear Iran. This is a new problem for the diaspora community. We have never before been in a position to really take decisions or help make decisions or take positions on decisions that involve Israel's existential survival. There was no opportunity in 1948 for there to be input. It was a war of ein b'reira. There was no choice. In 1967, there was a surprise attack planned. In 1973, again, on Yom Kippur, a surprise attack. The Osiris reactor in 1981, we had no input. Nobody knew that was going to happen. Whatever happened in Syria, the same thing was true with the nuclear reactor. Others, there has been an opportunity for input, but they were not existential decisions. 1956, the Lebanon wars, cast lead. So this is a very unusual situation in which the Jewish community, the pro-Israel community, is speaking out, and in a very divisive way as well, about what Israel should do in relation to Iran. And I want to urge some diffidence and some caution and some modesty when it comes to participating in that debate. The issue is, I needn't tell you, extraordinarily complex. It is extraordinarily multifaceted. It is ever-changing. It is a problem, and I can tell you this having spoken to leaders both in this country and in Israel and intelligence people in both countries. There is no certainty involved. We are dealing with probabilities. This is a problem of Bayesian analysis with ever-shifting factors. This is not something you can simply express a clear, permanent, unalterable position on. It is the most difficult decision Israel has probably ever had to make. And whether you consider the Iranians rational or not rational, I can tell you one thing about the current leadership. They are clever and strategic. They understand precisely how to exploit differences between the United States and Israel over timing, over red lines. Don't ever underestimate the cleverness of the Iranians. They are perhaps the cleverest enemy that Israel and the United States has ever faced. Many of you know the work of people like Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize, and Tversky, who tragically died before he could have won the Nobel Prize, about how difficult it is for human beings to make decisions based on shifting probabilities. We're just not very good at it. Neither are intelligence agencies all that good at it. We have seen instance after instance where intelligence agencies have made mistakes when it comes to decisions of this kind. Particularly in this case, the considerations point in multiple directions. Obviously, everybody in this room agrees, and I know the President of the United States agrees because I've spoken to him about this issue. Everybody agrees that no country, least of all a country comprised of people who suffered near extinction 70 years ago, no country can ever leave its destiny in the hands of another nation. No matter how much one trusts the United States or any particular President of the United States, the decision about what Israel must do must be made by Israel. By the way, this would be the same no matter who the Prime Minister of Israel was. It would be the same no matter who the President of the United States was. This is not a question of personalities. This is not a question of parties. This is not a question of bipartisanship. This is a question of the reality. Israel must make that decision. But it's also true that Israel's long-term survivability, regardless of the great steps forward that it's taken to protect itself and create independence militarily, Israel, however, does need the support of the United States. And there's no question, therefore, that although Israel must make its own decision, it must consider what the implications will be for the alliance with the United States. So even that factor pushes in different directions. A surgical strike may very well weaken the mullahs, but it may very well strengthen them. We just don't know. We talked about the unpredictability of the Arab Spring, the unpredictability of what an Israeli strike would be, assuming it would be successful, on the Iranians' ability to garner support among other Muslim and Arab nations and in the international community, and indeed among its own people, is less than certain. It is also clear that Israel would be credited by some, blamed by others, credited by some publicly, credited by others privately. The mix of what the reaction would be is utterly unpredictable. The one thing I think that's very clear is that Israel would have the legal and moral right to take unilateral action if it felt it was necessary to its own survival. The case for Israel's right to do it is extremely compelling. Number one, Iran is already in a state of war with Israel. Iran has attacked Israeli territory both directly, obviously in Argentina years ago, and indirectly through providing weapons that are being used directly against Israeli citizens through Hezbollah and Hamas. So Iran is in a state of war with Israel. An attack by Israel on Iran's nuclear reactors, were it to come, would not be a preventive or a preemptive attack. It would, under law, be a reactive attack, and a perfectly lawful reactive attack. Having said that, I don't think that Ambassador Prosser would disagree with me when I say that the international community might take a somewhat different view of this matter. So in every instance, we are seeing issues that push in multiple directions. So I really do believe that a little deference and a little humility in the face of these uncertainties is required. I think that we who love Israel, who care for Israel, who have ideas that we think might be interesting or useful, We should never, ever hesitate to advise Israel, but do not dictate to Israel. Israel must make its own decision. That's what it means to be a democracy. The essence of a democracy is the right and the power to assess the risks and to decide on the destiny of your people and to bear the consequences of an erroneous decision. Put another way, the right of a democracy is not only the right to be right, but the right to be wrong. The right to make decisions and bear the consequences, because it will be the Israeli people who will bear any consequences. It will be the Israeli people who will reap the benefits if there are to be benefits. I'm asked all the time, do I think that Israel should unilaterally attack Iran if the United States does not do so? I refuse to answer that question. I do not know enough to answer that question. I know enough to say it would be legal. I know enough to say it would be moral. I know enough to say that if Israel were forced to do it, whether I agreed or disagreed with the decision, I would support it and defend it. I'm not sure the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, is aware that I was not completely supportive in every instance of every aspect of Operation Cast Lead, but I felt that Israel had the right to make that decision. And not, as a non-Israeli, I felt very comfortable defending Israel's right to make that decision and defending its actions and defending it against improper charges in the Goldstone report. And I think that that essentially is the role that Americans and others who support Israel but don't get a vote, don't get to vote. We could get a vote if we wanted to. We could vote with our feet. Everybody in this room has the right to make Aliyah and move to Israel and make decisions for Israel. But as long as we remain in the comfort of Cambridge and Times Square and in the United States, our role must be limited. Our role is to advise. Our role is to support. Our role is to counsel. Our role, for those of you who believe in that, is to pray for. Every Shabbat we pray for the people of Israel and the state of Israel. But in the end, our role is to recognize who must make that decision. And so my promise to the Israeli government is this: whatever decision you make, and please let it be a wise one and a careful one, and one that considers all the implications, positive and negative. I don't have to say this, a decision that is not based on domestic political considerations, either for Israel or for the United States, a decision that is wise and thoughtful. Whatever decision Israel makes, I will support it. I will defend it. I will advocate it. And I hope all of you will do the same thing. Thank you.